we need to start making more conscious material choices.
I set up an initiative called Make Fashion Circular.
It's a tsunami of change.
Hello and welcome to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Diff. My name is Colin and I am the host for this session. The Diff is an online festival of ideas that aims to shift mindsets and inspire action toward a circular economy. And what is a circular economy? In this session, we are going to delve deeper into that topic. And joining me in the studio are two of my colleagues, Stella and Seb. Hi folks.
Hello.
Stella, opening question. What is a circular economy?
What a trick. A circular economy, as opposed to a linear economy that we also refer to as a take, make and waste economy, is one that is restorative and regenerative by intention, by design. It's based on three principles: to design out waste, to keep products and materials in use, and to regenerate natural systems.
So today the economy primarily works in a way that you take something out of the ground, a resource, normally something quite finite, lots of energy goes into making a product out of it, but ultimately most of it gets wasted at the end. And the circular economy kind of says is, well, if you just, like, waste and pollution aren't really accidents, they're things that are consequences of the decisions we're making in this economy phase. What if we can build an economy that uses things rather than uses things up? And what if we can somehow emulate nature? There's no such thing as waste in nature. It doesn't exist. A leaf falls from a tree and it feeds the forest. Yeah.
Good answers. Well done. So I asked the first question off this show, but I'm looking for you at home to be asking most of the questions here. And you can do it in all the usual ways at the Diff by using the hashtag ThinkDiff on Twitter, or by commenting on the page you're watching this on, whether it's Facebook or on the ThinkDiff website. Put your comments and questions in there and I'll make sure that they go to our two experts in the studio. And slightly later on in this session as well, we'll be using a red pen graphic. It's an interactive graphic where we're asking you to put your thoughts and comments in on particular questions. We're going to jump to that soon and we'll be looking for you to be populating that graphic and giving us some live responses that we will reflect upon. But I also have a bunch of questions from some of our colleagues around the office. We've been moving around the office today with a camera asking some questions, and I'm going to put them to us, well, to all of us really, because I'll try and answer some as well. So
get involved.
I've made a fascinating or fantastic slideshow here that has a bunch of our colleagues.
Orange circle does.
And the ball will land on one of our colleagues and they will ask a question. So are we ready?
Go for it.
Okay, here we go.
Nick.
Hi, my name's Nick, and the most common question I get asked is, what's the difference between circular economy and sustainability?
Starting easy.
That's a very common question, right? We've all been asked the question, what's the difference between circular economy and sustainability? What would your answer be, Sam?
Circular economy, I think there's a few differences. I think the circular economy really focuses on, well, firstly, the word economy is super important. We're thinking about the whole system that sits around it, and actually a part of any system is the ability for businesses to make money and survive and thrive and enterprise. I think also design, so the idea that we're actually going back to the beginning and thinking about things fundamentally different, not just looking at, say, waste at the end. Another very common term, I was recently in the US, is zero waste. And so I think where you frame your beginning point is really crucial to the solutions you produce. So if you say we're aiming for zero waste, quite often the solutions are actually focused on you've got a pile of waste at the end, which you're going to do so much about.
Yeah, and I think if you take the business perspective, very often sustainability is going to be that department that sits on top of next to it or every other department, whereas the idea of a circular economy is really for this to be sitting at the core of the corporate strategy and to think about redesigning the whole operations of a company and really thinking systemically, as you said, Seb. So it's about how to rethink everything rather than just being more sustainable and being more efficient on certain operations.
I'm hearing you say, I mean, the way I picture it is or the way I would answer it is more that the circular economy is has a framework for action, which I guess encompasses a lot of what you've said. It's about design, it's about thinking about the materials pathway that it would flow through, whereas fair to say sustainability tends to want things to be better, but without a sort of defined way in which it would become better. And sometimes, if you to use the language of Brongart McDonough, better just means less bad than what
How
we've
can
had
we use
before.
less energy or fewer materials? How can we make things more efficient rather than more effective, or just to be made so that, you know, if we want things to be better, we should make better things?
So if anyone at home disagrees with us or agrees with us, it'd be good to hear their comments.
Especially if they agree with us.
Especially silence. Let's get another question from one of our colleagues. Let's see where the ball lands this time. Stella, it's your turn to make the noise. Ready? Go.
Ta-da!
Please don't ask me to do that.
I wanted to ask if circular economy is only for companies, industry, organization, or can we be circular in our everyday life?
Oof, that's another
What's
toughie, isn't
the role
it?
of the individual?
What's the role of the individual? That's what Hugo's asking, isn't it? Or
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of frustration from maybe many viewers here and just many people who want to understand their own role. I think, well, Hugo's questions focuses on our everyday life. So I think the choices we make as a consumer are all very important, and we definitely have a voice. And it's, I think with social media, and you won't disagree with this, I think every consumer can really voice what products they want to see be put on the market, and companies listen to that. So I think by making those conscious choices, this will help. However, what we see at the foundation, and the way we work is by putting emphasis on the work companies will, the change companies can do, because this will accelerate the transition. This is by working on what companies can change, the impact will be greater, faster. Now, when it comes to the individual, we all work in an organization. So I think we also can see our role within our organization. No matter where we sit, we could also have that impact, whether it's in HR, in finance, or in marketing. We can all also, if we're interested in the circular economy as an individual, try to shift the internal mindset of our organization.
There are a lot of individual roles in the circular economy. You can be a designer, you can be an academic, you can be in a business or a startup founder.
But you might be none of them. And what I took from Hugo's question was, for anybody on the street, is there something that they can do that they're not going to design something, they're not going to be the CEO or have the ear of the CEO? So
I think there's two kind of roles. I mean, there are things that you can kind of do within the current system, so you can reuse more stuff in certain cases, if you know where it's feasible to do so, or rent clothes. And you also kind of have a role as a citizen, as someone who, whether you're voting in certain ways or whether you're purchasing in certain ways, those things do have an effect, or whether you're supporting certain organisations or companies in their mission.
Mm-hmm.
the one thing that, I mean, I work in the learning team, as you know, and the one thing that I find exciting about introducing people to the concept is that you tell people they can play a role in creating this circular economy. It's up the street of really the answer you were given, and people get excited by that. Again, to go back to contrast the sustainability answer, where sometimes the problems around us seem far too big for us to tackle, and we're saying actually, because there's this defined framework, we know what needs to be done, and now you know what type of role you could play within that system about designing products and better systems to make sure that materials continue to circulate.
And sometimes we underestimate the value of an idea, or being able to see things differently. So people sort of want to jump to, what can I literally do tomorrow? But one of the things I think is most powerful about the circular economy, or empowering about a circular economy, is that ability to actually just look at things around you differently, and it can affect the way you act or behave or think in lots of different ways.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to what you were saying, if you're not a designer or if you don't have the ear of the CEO, and all you can do is making those different choices that would vouch for a circular model, I guess learning is the first thing you can do. Understanding what are those business models that are more circular, why a rental model is maybe more favorable, or why should you use, or what are the reusable coffee cup restaurants and coffees around me, that use those schemes. Just understanding what are the options out there, learning and seeing what are the options is maybe the first step.
Nice one. Okay, are you ready for a third question?
We've smashed the first two.
Are you ready to make the sound effect?
Please.
Not
Yes.
really, no.
Here we go. And go. Oh, it's Lou. What's Lou telling us?
Hi, I'm Lou, and the most common thing people ask me about the circular economy, once I've described it as restorative and regenerative by design, is what does restorative and regenerative mean?
That's a great question. Who wants to take
I
that?
think I should take it because I said it. And that's one I remember reading, because this is how the foundation describes the circular economy, and the first time I read it I was also wondering this. I never really officially inquired, so I'll go with my own understanding of what this is, and please correct me. We often refer to the circular economy as a framework that has two cycles, the biocycle and the technical cycle. And for me, those two words refer to those two cycles. The regenerative part refers to the biocycle, and the idea is that anything that we source from renewable sources can go back to the ground and nourish the soil. And this is what we call being regenerative, in my understanding. The restorative part is for the technical products that we have in our everyday world, our smartphones, our laptops, and everything that is that cannot just go back to the soil, but that we can repair, that we can remanufacture, that we can just restore and put back in a functioning state. So this is, to me, what is restorative. Yeah.
Has she got it right, Seb?
The two things I say is, one, what a freeze frame we've got on Lou's face there. That's superb. But the other thing I say is that in some ways, when you're talking about a whole new concept, you do kind of need new language in order to describe it. It's a kind of challenging thing. People say, oh, use a word we can understand, but actually we're talking about quite new things. And I think the way that Stella broke that down was quite apt.
And it goes back to that point that I was making about the less bad, or a challenge to the less bad, because if you're regenerating, then you're leaving the world in a better place than you found it, not just returning it to parity, right? Because the aim is to have a positive impact rather than a less bad impact.
On that one, the regenerative aspect makes a lot of sense. It's doing more good. How about the restorative aspect, though? Is this doing any more good, or is it just about bringing it back to parity, as you just said?
Well, I'll ask the questions here.
I wasn't asked to.
I was covering because I don't know an answer.
Sorry.
I think restorative is still
very.
very different from mitigating or recycling or words that sort of indicate, dealing with a problem. Restorative is about
Even
saying
sustaining, right?
Sustaining. It's about going back to the state it was at the beginning.
And it fits with that concept, that the idea that the goods and or the components are used at their highest value. You're restoring them to high value rather than putting them through the sort of loop of last choice and melting them down. That's the way I would see it anyway. You ready for one more?
Sure.
Here it comes. Who's it going to land on? Let's go.
Will you make the noise?
I shall. It's Rose.
The question I get asked the most about circular economy is, isn't it just recycling?
Isn't it just recycling? And that is, we ask them all, what's the question you get asked the most? And again, we've all been asked, isn't it just recycling? And recycling is part of a circular economy, of course. And my take on it whenever I'm asked this is, in common parlance, we talk about the putting goods back out as new as recycling. Like most people will use recycling, or a lot of people will use recycling to mean a whole range of different activities. But I guess to go back to your point, Seb, about a new language comes with the concept of a circular economy. It's more nuanced than simply recycling, isn't it? There's other layers to it all.
And indeed, for recycling to work effectively, the story you hear time and time again is, well, you need to design it differently in the first place. So you've already got a significant piece of the puzzle that you've added there. Like, you need to think differently at the beginning. And then obviously, if you think about our butterfly diagram, for example, which is one way of showing what the system looks like, we show recycling as our outermost loop, and the loops kind of indicate material flows back into the economy. And So there's a lot more value in reusing, in refurbishing, in remanufacturing technical items, because you're keeping so much of the embedded labour, energy and materials in those products. You're keeping them at their highest value rather than breaking them down and putting a lot of energy and effort into recycling them. So I think the sort of, I guess the reason that we get asked that question a lot is because it's easy to go to the thing you're most familiar with. So it's about going back to the beginning, and recycling kind of does that, or has a reputation for doing that, but it's a lot more than recycling. And that doesn't tackle the biological side at all, obviously.
And sometimes it's not just our friends and neighbours and so on who ask us that type of question. It is designers, it is professionals who we're trying to work with. And we had someone at the Diff today who was talking about UK's oil platforms, and the typical, because they're going through a decommissioning process, and the typical route the steel goes through is it gets recycled, because that's easy to do. The chap who was here speaking about it was saying he wants to try and shift people from recycling to reuse, because it's got a much higher value in all walks of life. So yeah, it's not just the folks in the street who might need to understand better some of these loops and some of the concepts, but yeah, designers and so on.
And it also, the recycle, obviously, if you think about plastics, for example, the scale of plastics production, you're never going to match the amount of plastics we're going to have with the amount of recycling infrastructure you're going to build. You're going to have to do something else within the system to design out some of that plastic, to make sure it's being reused, to do other things to make it work as an economy. So that's, fundamentally it's a different approach.
And I think this question really shows the current mindset of that linear economy. If we talk about recycling, it's because we want to deal with the waste we have, and we often forget that actually it's all about designing and redesigning and rethinking how we put products on the market in the first place. And maybe if we did that better, then we wouldn't even think about recycling. So yeah, I mean, that's going back to your first point. I don't have much to add there. Yeah.
Okay, so we've had a few questions from some of our colleagues. We're going to come back to our colleagues for some more questions soon. And in just a minute, we are going to jump to a red pen interactive graphic. You'll see the link for it on the webpage you're watching this on. And we're going to look for you to go in there and to comment on some of the questions that we've set up for you. But before we go there, we're going to hear from our colleague Rose, who we just saw, who's going to tell us what else is happening at the Diff.
Hi, I'm Rose, and here's a couple of recommendations of what's coming up. First up, Circularity and Frugality Tales from 3 continents. This session will show how frugal and circular solutions can complement one another. Then, Reimagining Reuse, the role of reuse network facilitators. This session will highlight the essential role of reuse network facilitators in the circular economy. Remember, you can join the discussion on Twitter using the hashtag ThinkDiff. You can catch up on anything you've missed and view the full schedule at thinkdiff.co or on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's YouTube channel. Enjoy watching!
Okay, thank you, Rose. There's just a few of the sessions that are happening at the Diff this week. This is a 5-day Diff, and we've got something like 10 sessions every single day. Everything you've missed you can watch by going to thinkdiff.co and watching it all on catch up. Right, we promised you interactivity. We want to see your comments and questions coming in now as we jump to this red pen graphic. It looks exactly like this here. The link to it is on the page you're watching this on. And what happens on this graphic here is you can click on it, leave a comment, and we will see it appear as you leave that comment. What we've done with this graphic is we have got a bunch of headlines here and 2 statements on a certain topic. And we're asking people to decide which statement they most closely align with. And there are penalties for people who click in the middle or decide that they're a bit of both.
The yellow's there.
Totally down there. Every single one has people stuck things down the middle. Come on. So we're going to go through this. And we're going to get our thoughts in the studio, all 3 of us. And we're going to look at some of the comments that have come in. So let's get to it. Design from waste. We've talked a bit about this. So designs from waste, there's statement number 1. Designs from waste fit in a circular economy because they slow down the rate of waste creation. Or designs from waste do not fit in a circular economy because they are ultimately downcycled. Do you, well,
Before
have an
answering,
opinion?
can we ask what is the penalty? I will jump into both blue and green
oh
boxes.
my, what, straight away?
Well, just so we know what the penalty is and we can, get on with this.
Would it be useful if we start by saying what do
Design
we
from
really
waste.
mean by design from waste? Because I think from reading the comments there's a bit of uncertainty here.
How I interpret it is that it means that perhaps you take sweet wrappers and turn them into a bag, for example. There's a couple of companies that do that. So something that's wasteful, you can't really do much with it for various reasons, or there's not the opportunity to do it right now, and you turn it into a kind of product that you can then sell that's maybe has some market value because it's kind of eco-friendly or whatever.
So it's end of pipe, because it's like, uh-oh, we've got a problem, what are we going to do with it? I've got an idea, turn it into a bag. Yeah, that's why I understand design from waste.
Yeah.
I'm 100% on the side of green.
Wait, how far over 100%? Like here?
Yes, there.
Whoa. Why are you why are you saying that?
I mean, I sort of think there's a difference between. It's not that I think it's fine to design stuff from waste, but I don't see it as having any role in the circular economy, because ultimately it doesn't really do anything that we say a circular economy should do. It doesn't design out waste and pollution because the products that you're making are still waste. It's not like if you turn sweet wrappers into a bag that's designed out waste, really, that maybe you've prolonged sweet wrappers use and maybe you've created something that's going to leak into the environment other ways. Yeah, so I don't see those products actually fitting in with the economy aspect, and I also think that they only really work when there's kind of not so many of them. You're never going to scale that process to a point where it's feasible beyond being kind of a nice thing that people can indulge in.
Stella, you fundamentally disagree with Seb, don't you?
No, not exactly. I feel like I agree with you because it feels like with this statement, if we want to design for with the blue statement, we're kind of making a statement for producing more waste, more rags to make more bags. So we need to create, we need to create more waste, which ultimately is not really where we want to go. It can, for me, it can be part of the transition, and we will need to find routes and avenues for some sort of waste. And there are, you can make beer from breadcrumbs, and this is waste from an industry, a byproduct that is not currently used, but it's actually being, what I would say, upcycled. And maybe we need to touch upon the wording here, downcycle and upcycle. What do we actually mean? I don't think it's clear for anyone.
But is it different in the biocycle? Because it's not waste in the same way a sweetie wrapper is like single use. Now it's rubbish.
That's what you said. Yeah, no, that's true. I think, I guess in the technical cycle, you don't want any waste, and it wouldn't be. And then, in that case, I would definitely stand on the green side. We don't want to design from waste, because in a circular economy, if in a true circular economy, there's no waste to begin with.
And this sort of pure idea of maintaining high quality materials and products and components, yeah, absolutely, it's in the green side, isn't it? And also in the blue side, it's to slow down. Again, if we're talking about this from a pure circular economy perspective, you don't want to slow down waste. You want to eliminate it.
Exactly.
Yes. We can see lots of comments have come in on this question already. Is there anyone we want to pick out, or shall we move on to the next one?
You decide.
It's a strong move on there, isn't it? Let's do that. Reminder to the folks at home, if you comment, we will see your comment appear and we'll pick up on those. Someone stuck one right in the middle again. Planned obsolescence. Seb, what is planned obsolescence?
Planned obsolescence is the idea that actually you design a product for a defined use period, even though the product is actually capable of lasting much longer. So in a famous example of this, one of the first examples of this is the light bulb example. The light bulb industry came together in the early 1900s and actually restricted the number of hours that a light bulb can last. They designed all light bulbs to basically last, I think it's 100 and something years, even though even in 1900s they could last much longer. So designing something so that it won't last forever deliberately.
Okay, so my Wi-Fi connection's died.
This is a live show. That's just to prove that this is a live show.
I think we're back on now. Great definition, though, of planned obsolescence, I assumed. So the question, or rather the two statements are, Here we are. The consequences of planned obsolescence are restricting for the users, not enabling them to use the product optimally. Therefore, planned obsolescence does not fit in a circular economy. Or if planned obsolescence became defined use periods, let's talk about that, it empowers companies to keep products in more effective loops in a more manageable way. Therefore, these defined use periods fit in a circular economy. Defined use periods? Who wants to tackle that one?
So the way I interpret that is that rather than the product being limited to a certain lifespan, actually a company and user go into an arrangement where there's a period of time that product's used for. So
does that mean that the manufacturer would take it back?
yes.
Is that included implicitly?
That's my interpretation of it, that you would actually be using the product rather than owning it.
It's a very deliberate period of time where this is going to be optimal for 3 years or whatever.
I'm standing very far on the green side because I don't think you need planned obsolescence to implement those defined use periods. I think this is quite smart to define for how long the product is going to be at its optimum working performance. But you could do this on a different model, so on a rental model, on a leasing model. The user would pay monthly or weekly or annually for the product, and whenever it starts to not perform as well, it can be sent back to the manufacturer, and they get a new one or they stop the subscription. I don't see the role of planned obsolescence in a circular economy.
So you're in the blue then, right? Because I thought you said green earlier.
Yeah, planned obsolescence doesn't fit in a circular economy.
But you're in favour of defined use periods.
Yeah.
So you're in the blue
But
side.
I don't think you need planned obsolescence to implement defined use periods. You could, well,
I think that's what the statement says. If planned obsolescence becomes...
Well, I guess the defined use period, in my understanding, is
Live comment
at least a month of a user paying for a product, for the use of a product. So on the rental model, this would be a defined use period, but I guess with a different definition, that's what you said. I'm making it very confusing.
I was on the green until last night at about 5:36. And then at 5:36 last night, I switched all the way over to the blue because I was interviewing Martin Drake-Knight, who's the founder of a clothing brand that's based in the Isle of Wight called Rapa Nui. That's a really impressive sort of circular economy model. There's a case study on our website. It's worth looking at. And he actually said to me, I don't want my products to last forever. That's terrible because think about that, then it's there forever. I want products that are going to, in some way either biodegrade or be, that their defined period is over and I can do something with them, which I thought was really powerful. And actually, so I think if building in an understanding of how long a product's going to be optimal for and it's going to survive for allows companies to effectively reutilize those resources and those components of products, I think it's actually very much part of the circular economy.
So you're in the blue as well?
I'm strongly in the blue.
Yeah, me too. And so is Simon, who has just commented it can also just be planned obsolescence of components and not complete product, i.e. development of more efficient energy components, but original product is good to use. And that really, I was thinking along these lines about when a technology comes along that makes something more efficient, let's say it uses less heat or less energy, then yeah, it's a really good thing that we would switch out a component or even swap an entire product round if the savings are so much that it's beneficial to swap a whole product.
Right, and if it was designed to be disassembled and modular.
Yes, I think that's a crucial part of it too, isn't it? All fits with the, you need the whole picture.
If you didn't start in the blue, Stella, that you've moved over to that side during the conversation.
Right.
Back to this.
Let's go into the next one. There's one I enjoy: efficiency versus effectiveness. Two different terms, but often used in the same way, I guess. I see them being used. So in the blue column, a circular economy only means an economy that slows down resource consumption because there's always material leakage, versus a circular economy is a regenerative economy that behaves like a forest. To feed itself, it feeds the individual tree, which in turn feeds the forest. Very metaphorical from our metaphorical friend Ken. Are you feeding a
Webster,
forest in
who's-
your job here?
Filling a forest.
You're feeding a forest.
I mean, it's definitely the dream statement, and this is where we want to get to. I think I clearly disagree with the idea of slowing down, that a circular economy slows down resource consumption. We're not talking about decreasing growth. It's about we want to maintain our growth, and we want to be able to use as much consumption as we need as a society to keep growing and operating. It's about using our resources differently and not consuming less. It goes back to the idea of sustainability again, or versus the perfect loop of a circular economy. The forest metaphor is exactly what we mean by a regenerative economy, doing more good, if that's any English. So yeah, I'm definitely on the green side.
Why is one defined efficient and the other effective? What's your take on that, Seb?
I think on the green, I'm firmly on the green side. I think that the effectiveness thing also speaks to resilience. We had a session earlier in the Diff this year with some biomimicry experts, and they had a video showing termites. And in a termite mound, you've got termites that are building these structures at the same time as other termites are taking them down. Even though a termite mound is actually an incredible system when you think about how they maintain about 80% humidity, and that's what they like, and they do it with just earth, and there's millions of termites. And they were saying that that is not logical if you're just trying to build an efficient system. You just get all the termites to do one thing and work towards one goal. But actually it's extremely resilient because you've got termites sort of counteracting over, making the place too humid or not humid enough. There's a system in balance there, and I think that's a bit of an indication of the difference between an efficient system, which can be quite not particularly resilient, and an effective system.
Nice point. The way I look at the two terms is we want systems to be effective, and if efficiency helps us get there, all fine and well. But if it doesn't, then we're not interested in it, because we want to get to effectiveness.
More live comments coming in.
I saw that, yeah. Were you trying to shut me up? I was trying to give my answer.
No. Very good point, Colin, sorry.
Let's see then. Christina says, zero waste is the ideal. This is the idea we must work toward. Nature has shown us that this ideal is possible. Well,
I don't think there's no waste in nature.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, so what are you saying to Christina?
For me, actually, if you look at nature, there's actually quite a lot of waste in nature. Nature is highly wasteful. You look at the example that...
Is it damaging?
It's not damaging, exactly. Yeah, if you look at the example that Michael Braungart often uses of a cherry tree, all the blossoms fall to the ground. Most of them don't turn into cherry trees. Very few turn into cherry trees. Thankfully, yeah. But so it's actually extremely wasteful. If that's not lack of waste, but of course those blossoms are food for so many different things, and a system builds up around them.
An effective system.
Yes.
But, I mean, we know where Christina's coming from, though.
Exactly.
Nothing gets wasted is the point that's being made.
I think I'm being a bit pernickety around the line.
Love to disagree. So.
Let's have a look at this orb that is growing. Simon again. If we have a truly circular concept, then we can enjoy abundance.
Great point, Simon.
That works with the cherry blossom tree idea, isn't it? There's an abundance, and everything fits the system, so it works well. You know what we're going to do? We're going to pick one last one. There's two to go with. Logistics or access over ownership. Any favourites here? You want to go logistics? Oh no, you want me to pick?
Yeah.
Logistics, let's do it. Okay, logistics in a circular economy. I believe that humanity will be able to redesign global logistics in a way that generates much less impact. Versus, I believe that true answers lie in localising production and eliminating the increasing need for transportation. Now immediately we can see, of those who've answered, we've got 3 on one side, 3 on the other, and the inevitable 1 in the middle.
So we still don't know what the penalty is.
Let's name and shame that person.
We know where they live. So, right, okay, we're talking about how goods get transported backwards and forwards. So can we redesign them, Stella, so that we create less impact? Or does it make more sense in a circular economy that goods are produced locally?
I'm going to have the penalty. I think we need to rethink how to produce more locally. And one comment that I love, I can't remember, is it the blue one, the purple? This one is very insightful. But one that states, Colin Webster, a great master of the circular economy, said once, it's easier to ship recipes than cakes and biscuits. And I think this is just such a great image. So anything that we can produce locally, I think we should, and decentralize that production as much as possible. However, I also feel like there is a challenge. In today's society, you can't expect consumers not to eat cacao or bananas because it just doesn't grow in Europe here, or just to give up on certain products because we don't want to ship globally. Sorry. So we are a global economy, and we also need to rethink the way we do logistics so that we can have access to any kinds of products that are made on this planet.
So yeah, the quote about shipping recipes rather than cakes is about digitizing as much as possible. But then, yeah, you're saying some stuff should be made local, but some stuff inevitably cannot be.
Exactly.
Someone's teasing us by putting comments right in the middle. I don't know if you noticed that. We'll come to that person in a minute. But Seb, where do you sit? Do you think we can redesign global logistics?
I don't have a very informed opinion about this. However, one example that I can think of, and maybe that moves me a little bit towards the green side even, is that in the world of food production, we have a project right now that looks at food in cities. And there's a lot of talk and a conversation in that project about how do we localise more food production. And of course, you can localise a certain amount of food production with urban farming, peri-urban farming, sourcing food from the local area. But actually, those aren't necessarily the most resilient systems for food production, because one area, of course, can be hit by a natural disaster, for example, and actually that can wipe out all of a city's food. So it almost needs a global supply chain as well that works to make sure that people in the cities can have food, as well as, of course, as Stella kind of mentioned, the preferences for the consumer choice that is kind of established. But so I think even from a resiliency point, if you look at just food in cities, there's value in having global supply chains.
Nice. Libby here has said something about how, we live in a truly globalized world, and that's not going to change, is what she's saying. Okay, so another comment came in from Christina about making our economy as local as possible. Oh, we've got another one.
Loving the interaction. Yeah. Fantastic job, guys.
It's Simon. Simon's on the green side with you, Seb.
Thank you, Simon.
It really depends on what you're producing, for whom, and for what purpose. For example, not all food can be produced locally effectively. Point is discussed by drawdown.org. Yeah, that's true. Yes, and I would agree with that, right? You said it yourself. Banana and cacao are not going to grow locally on the Isle of Wight anyway. Okay, so that's us looked through the red pen graphic, and this graphic stays here, doesn't it? So people can just keep interacting and joining in the conversation.
And disagreeing with Seb. Yeah.
Indeed. We are going to jump back to one or two more questions from our colleagues, and just a reminder to folks at home that this is an opportunity for you to fire some questions at us in the last few minutes of this show, and Stella and Seb will do their darndest to answer them, and maybe even me as well. But let's get the next question from one of our colleagues. Stella, I believe you're on the sound effects. Ready for it? And we're off. It's Leo. What wise words does Leo have for us? Ready?
Hello, my name is Leo, and the most common question I get asked about the circular economy is, what does it mean for me?
Is that different enough from Hugo's question? Should we jump to another one?
I think that there's something there about, I think it's very related to the previous question. There is something about it's also a personal thing. It kind of relates a little bit to the exercise we just did, that you kind of situate. There are values that sit underneath the economy, and how we perceive the world around us and our own values can kind of shape how we see it or think about it.
Does the question also speak to the idea that my life is going to change regardless of what role I try to play? What will daily life look like for me in a circular economy? What I
You
mean,
can certainly interpret it in that way, Colin, if you want to.
there's layers to what Leo always says.
There's always a lot of depth when you get into a conversation with Leo.
How are people's lives going to change, Stella? Like the way in which they access
hopefully,
goods.
Exactly. Hopefully, we still have access to everything, just not the same way. So instead of owning, we might just be renting, and someone else or a company owns the product we're actually using. But hopefully, our daily life doesn't actually change, and our spending power could be enhanced. It might be much cheaper to rent instead of owning, to share a wardrobe, to share cars and rent. So maybe we could benefit from it.
And that's the ideal outcome, isn't it? Alongside the environmental benefits of cleaner air and quieter streets and so on, because we're not all having our own cars and driving back and forth all the time. Yeah. Okay, let's take one final question from the group. Seb, you're on the audio. Ready, steady, Sebby.
Woo!
Vicky.
Hi, my name's Vic, and the most common question I get asked about the circular economy is what does it actually mean? And then I get asked, can you tell me that again in language that I understand?
Well, you talked earlier about...
What a question to finish on.
What on earth is Vicky saying to people?
Yeah.
But you talked earlier about there's a new vocabulary that comes with an idea like this, or any concept. Is that a problem?
I think it's a challenge because our language and the way we describe things, as we've kind of talked about a few times in this session, shapes our perceptions of things and how we actually act and think. I think stories are a really powerful way of getting across the circular economy idea. I think that the more stories that sort of emerge and the better we get at telling those stories, the more people sort of get it than necessarily just the pure concept, although that's also necessary. So that would be my advice to Vicky when they ask her again what it means, is to identify a couple of stories.
On top of stories, I think images and concrete examples really help. So the tree in the forest metaphor is great. We also often talk about systems, but what the hell is a system? Is it one thing? Can it be many different things? Can it be on different scales? So giving examples, saying that a body, an organism is a system, but also a city is another system, and the world ultimately is yet another system. Giving images and examples, and then I think what is always, when I explain the circular economy, there's a whole idea around business models and what it means for the consumer. So I always give a couple of examples of business models, like a rental model for clothing, for example, that often really helps understanding the difference. Yeah.
And on one level, like, it's a line to a circle is quite simple, and then, but of course, on another level, it is hard. Like, it isn't just easy to get your head around, like, a really significant shift in the way in which we should be doing things, or the way in which we want it, especially the way in which we produce and make and use everything around us. So it is, like the fact it's hard to explain and hard to get your head around at times is just reflective, perhaps a little bit, of the seismic shift that it kind of represents.
It is a seismic shift. It fundamentally challenges a lot of what's around us and how we've lived our lives and how we experience and expect the world to work. So it's inevitable people will sometimes struggle with accepting a new concept. So I agree with you. Stories, metaphors work really well. Giving examples as well. Yeah, terrific ways to help people make that shift. And on that note, I think
there's a lot of those stories at the Diff.
There are.
Where we are now.
And on that note, thank you very much, Stella and Seb. We have had a quick run through really of what a circular economy is, and we've taken some of these challenging questions from some of our colleagues and some of you online as well. The red pen graphic will remain online and we will still be interacting with it, so please go there and join in with the conversation, even if you're watching this on catch up. The Diff is full of activity from Monday up to Friday, but all of the content will stay there for some time yet, so if you've missed something, you can easily catch up with it. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
We need to start making more conscious material choices.
Set up an initiative called Make Fashion Circular.
It's a tsunami of change.